recording in progress noise has just come out, so there's no way you can claim you didn't know. I have it on record. Oh, welcome to everybody, and I hope everyone's having a jolly old International Overdose Awareness Day, which is what this is being taped for. I probably made that joke already into this process. This is going to be in the live stream here, with one exception. Any of you out there that are Patreoners, if you're on the Brainiac level of the Patreon for the show, you got to see this video and hear this audio already before August 31st. So y'alls are special. I am joined for this segment by Ryan Luis Rodriguez of the One Track Mind and the Reels of Justice podcast fame. Two award-winning podcasts. Let me just write down. I'm going to send you some awards here. Award-winning.
Can I get a Clio? I really want a Clio. I don't even know what a Clio is, but I want that.
I saw that. I saw that there was an ad for that on Facebook. Somehow Facebook knows I'm a podcaster, and it was like, you want to join. That's the podcasting one, right? Clio?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. It's something like that.
So we both deserve it. That's all I'm saying. That's
all. I think we should get in there. We'll blow away Office Ladies and Freedom and all the ones. Whoever isn't that? I think they won that one.
Joe Rogan. We got to blow away Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That guy needs to be taken down a 5 peg or two.
We're making hashtag goals here for podcasters. We have to. Someone's gonna hear this and go take down Joe Rogan. Well, actually, you know what? That's okay. I'm all right with that.
You know what? Yeah, I can live. I live.
Well, so we are together again for the first time. Not the first time, even on this show. Actually, you've been on my show before.
Yes, I have. I talked about crying over Cars 3. It was a very proud moment in my existence.
That's right. Yes, this is a take off of that. We'll get into whether or not and how much we cried. Spoiler alert: if I watched any movie, I probably did at some point. That's kind of in my wheelhouse. But we are going to be talking about the powers of film and storytelling as applied to addiction, as this is, of course, an addiction awareness event that's happening today. And I must say, not only am I grateful, of course, to be talking to you, Ryan, but also this pre-recorded segment helps because it's 45 minutes to an hour of me being able to take a break from the live broadcast. So that's dope as well. And speaking of dope, no. Actually, we'll see if that's one of them. We are coming to you now. We're going to share some movies. Geez, I should have picked Dope. It's a good movie too. Anyway,
it is a great movie.
So that was that's not one of my selections, but maybe people should check that one out as well. We're going to be talking about films that showcase some of the just parts of addiction or addiction adjacent. We've each picked a couple of films, and we're going to go through and share those with each other, and by the law of association with y'alls as well, because you're listening and watching to us right now. That's a pretty good intro, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. You want to do it again?
Yeah. No, it's just one pass only. I won't remember what I said. So where do you want to go first? We picked 2 movies each about addiction or drug use or things like that. Would you want to go first or second? What's your choice?
I can go first. I can definitely go first.
Okay. What is your number one pick?
My number one pick is Leaving Las Vegas.
Yes. Well, let's tell everybody what it is. I mean, hopefully they know, but if they don't know, tell them what it is, and we'll get into why you picked it.
Yes, it is Nicolas Cage as an alcoholic who lost his job, his friends, and his family, and decides to go to Las Vegas and drink himself to death. And then he meets a sex worker played by the lovely Elizabeth Shue, who I would give up drugs for in a heartbeat, even though I'm not currently on drugs, but I want to start taking drugs so that I can give them up for Elizabeth Shue. But it's one of those things where he kind of finds himself through this strange situation, and it reminded me a lot of my own experiences because I am a former alcoholic. I guess there is no such thing as former. You're a recovering alcoholic as long as you live, and a recovering drug addict. And it was something that I didn't see until maybe a year and a half ago because it was on Turner Classic Movies. And I was like, well, that's weird that a movie from 1995 would be on Turner classic movies, but I watched it anyway, and I was profoundly affected by it.
It's almost 20 years old.
Yeah.
If you
God.
think about it that way. I remember when it came out, I didn't see it. I never have seen it. I had forgotten about this. This is a good choice. And I'll say here, I mean, we can get into little spoilery areas because I think it might behoove us to do that as we're talking about some of the, if it affects the dynamics. One of the things that I think is interesting about that movie is, if I understand correctly, he does not give up drinking.
No.
Or Elizabeth Shue, or for any other reason.
No, he does not.
Yeah. And it's a pretty somber take. And I always think it's interesting when they showcase, this will probably reflect in all of our choices. All of the choices, I'm guessing, but movies that showcase some of the cost associated with addiction, which is, I mean, for one thing, if it isn't interrupted, it can easily lead to death, right? Which is what this movie's all about. In this case, with that being actually his intention, Right.
And based on a story by a writer who shortly after selling the property ended up killing himself.
I did not know that.
Yeah. It's not the most uplifting story in the world, but then again, I mean, if the guy's life wasn't uplifting, the things that spawn from his brain are certainly not going to be either. They're going to be pretty uncompromising.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a somber take on some of the realities of that. I'm curious of your thoughts about this. I think that a lot of times substance abuse can tie back to, obviously there's all sorts of elements, right? Self-medication, and mental health struggles, as well as trauma, things like that. But there's also a self-punishing at times where, especially if someone's been abusing alcohol or drugs for a long time, that can become part of it. Where do I deserve to live? Do I, at what point is there this kind of self-punishing for some people?
I'm glad you said that, because that actually ties into my own personal experience. Because when I was in my 20s, I've always suffered from insomnia, like as long as I lived. So I've been taking cocktails of antidepressants and sleep medications since I was 15 or 16. So I've been on this, I mean, I'm now 37, so I've been on this a long time, and that hasn't changed. But my sleep got so bad that I did not like the taste of alcohol, so I was not an alcoholic ahead of time. But I started getting desperate and started drinking with my antidepressants and my sleeping medications in order to accelerate the process. And I gradually realized, if I keep doing this, I'm going to die. There is no two ways about it. And later on, I realized I was processing trauma. I was processing my own personal inadequacies. And I'm glad I was able to stop. But I think that there is a timeline in which I didn't. And that is what's kind of illuminating by this film, I think, in particular.
Yeah. Well, and by having the protagonist really advance into this plan, and shall we say goes through with it, basically is his intention, right? Is that I don't remember, maybe I never knew what the sort of event was that lit the wick to this decision for him. It was when he got fired, and then his wife became estranged, and everybody basically abandoned him from one bad situation, and that just completely spirals into utter hopelessness. Yeah. Well, and I've had this experience too that you're talking about, where you get to a point where you feel like either choices you've made or circumstances or whatever have sapped the enjoyment out of things, and throw in depression or any kind of mood irregularities too, right? I was talking right before we hit record, and I talk on the program quite a bit about my own experience with bipolar disorder. You get all those things line up at the wrong time, and it's like all of a sudden you don't really want or care about life, because life doesn't seem worth anything. There's no value attached to it. And even if you only feel that for a burst of a period, man, that can cast a shadow, whether it
can haunt you for a long time.
Yeah. And it can be, even when you're kind of happy, sometimes those things carry, therapy and meds and things like that have really helped me But it can carry on to see where you can just sometimes even just walk around with kind of a misery feeling of just, well, the world sucks and life sucks, right? I'm okay today, but it sucks, right?
But tomorrow's definitely going to be worse. That kind of mentality.
Yeah. And I think that's where you get all the way from like a real either latent suicide to active suicidal substance abuse to also just being like, well, why not? Is it going to mess up my health? Why not? Why not self-medicate with whatever?
Right.
Whatever that is. Sometimes it's choices and behaviors as well. But specifically today, we're focused on opioid dependence and things like that. But then that also goes back to the thing of where addiction fuels itself, right? At some point. So
yeah,
that's a great choice. And, I'm going to, let's see. So I got to decide which one I'm going to do first. I'm going to lead that into, now I'll go with this because we're talking about alcoholism in the movies. Here's one that I thought was very different than people thought it was going to be. And that is a little movie that came out in 2010 called Everything Must Go. And if anyone's not familiar with that, this is a starring.
Oh, it's a vehicle. It's definitely a vehicle.
Yeah. Will Ferrell is the star of this movie. And the premise of the movie lined up to give people the wrong expectation. Let me put it this way. Similar to like, you ever see Stranger Than Fiction? I'm sure you have.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, that was another one. I remember seeing it in the theater, and there were some teenagers sitting behind me who were not prepared for this iteration of Will Ferrell being fairly serious in some parts.
And downtrodden.
Yeah. So in this one, this even takes that to the next level. The premise is that he comes home from a business trip, this character, and he finds all of his stuff on the front lawn of his house. And his wife has moved everything out onto the front lawn and wants him to leave, basically. Right. Mm-hmm. So what he does is he figures out through a series of events that you're not allowed to just pile stuff all over your lawn and just leave stuff outside. So what he does is he takes a folding chair and he puts up a sign that says yard sale. Right. And because if it's a yard sale, you can leave stuff outside for up to 3 days. He doesn't want to leave, and he has no place to put everything. So basically he just puts up a sign that says everything must go. And for the first little while, doesn't even sell anything. People come by and he's like, get out of here. Leave me alone. Right. That type
always
of thing.
A good selling technique.
Yes, exactly.
Go away. I don't want your money.
So, but when you hear that premise, I think you think it's going to be a comedy, right? Will Ferrell in that premise sounds like a comedy. And not a comedy. There is a comedic element to it. But what it is you find out as the movie goes on is that he is an alcoholic in recovery who went on a business trip. I don't really recall I don't think it ever goes into exactly what happened, but he has experienced a relapse, a very serious relapse, and something happened. And his wife, who I believe is also in recovery, interestingly enough, we never meet her. She's in the house the whole time or just not around.
So it's like, what's his name? Norm's wife in Cheers, where they just constantly talk about her and then we never actually get to see her.
Never actually see her.
Or Niles' wife in Frasier.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think isn't she in one episode of Frasier?
She's not. Trivia. I just watched all of Frasier.
Oh, really?
She does not actually appear.
I had heard a rumor that she was in there somewhere, but no, she never really appears. That's interesting. But anyway, I think they're both in recovery together. But what happens is Michael Pena is also in it. He plays a policeman in the area, and he's the one who actually helps him to understand the law of like, you can leave the stuff here for 3 days if you put up a sign. Turns out they are 12-step friends that go to the same group, right? Mm-hmm. And he knows what's happened, and he's feeling for him, that and is somewhat trying to help. It goes into the nature of their relationship as well. But so here he is. And at this point, he's still, when in the movie starts, he's still drinking. He's still well within this relapse, right, that he's experiencing. And so there's this whole catharsis of, well, everything must go. And it goes from there. So did you ever see this, by the way?
I have not seen this. When I worked at Blockbuster, we had it, but I was dissuaded by the presence of Will Ferrell, who I had gone from loving to then being like, okay, so he's the same guy in every movie, and no, thank you. And then swinging back to being interested in him again when he started really branching out and taking on new roles. But I looked at this cover that we had there, and I assumed that it was just a dumb Will Ferrell comedy, because it's the, you know, the typical sad sack picture of him on the front, and so it, and big flashy letters, it lulls you into this fake sense of security that it's going to be a movie that you've seen a million times before. And I was just not interested in that. But now I want to see it.
Yes. No, you should check it out. It's really interesting, particularly the way it has, like, there's a kid in the neighborhood who's kind of at first bothering him, and, you know, and a couple of people that he sort of has interactions with that shape what this is. But it's a real simple kind of movie. And while it is, I mean, this is no surprise to anyone who's watching it. While there's a redemptive aspect to the story, certainly, it isn't without cost, right? It does showcase that some things we don't get back, right? And some things, even if there is recovery, there's sacrifice, there's cost, and nothing's perfect, right?
Right.
And not just for him. There's indications that other people in recovery, that's one thing that I think is important, is that getting into recovery from addiction is not becoming a perfect person. And I feel like some of the lesser adaptations and stories about addiction try to showcase people in a way that almost makes them these kind of like self-improvement superheroes, right? That it's like, oh, and they're this like sainthood kind of but no, it's just becoming a person that is engaging with, as they say, like reality on reality's terms, or, you know, embracing a more healthy, trying to be well-adjusted and healthy like we all are. But yet it's complicated. We're still complicated people. We still do things that are unwise or foolish or selfish, as well as, you know, selfless and helpful to other people as well. So
like nothing is guaranteed. I think that's the ultimate lesson of addiction.
Yeah.
Is that we think that when we're in the throes of something and we acknowledge it, that we are, pardon my French, that we're fucked up and that's it. And that, or if we get over the hump and we say, well, now that I've kicked that out of my life, now my life is going to be great. And it just means that you've turned into a new chapter. Possibly you've dog-eared a page and maybe you'll go back to that page. But with, you know, with all the hope in the world, maybe you've moved on to something else, but there's no guarantee whatsoever that anything will actually get better around you. You might become a more self-aware person, but really that's all you should be trying to achieve anyway. You should just be trying to be the better person of yourself that you can possibly be.
Yes, that's a really good point. One of the things that it showcases here too is the judgment that he does face of being reduced to his addiction, being reduced to his habits by how this impacted his job and things like that too, and by the way people look at him. And I like that as well, because in sort of balance out what I just said, I guess, right, is that oftentimes there's lots of assumptions that are made about people that, oh, this is who you are. This relapse is who you are now. And look at you and this. And so being able to transcend that, most importantly, in our own self-image, right, in our own mind, to transcend that. So it's a great movie, I would suggest. And be honest, while I think I knew that it wasn't a madcap comedy or whatever, but I used to go with this group of friends. It was like a guys' movie night, but we specifically targeted more like indie movies and things like that weren't as much. And so we saw this it was showing in an indie theater anyway, in the area. And we kind of went in thinking, oh, is this going to be comedy? What is this going to be? And everybody walked out thinking that was great, but it was, not what we expected in a good way, just like you said. So, all right. Well, all right. What's your number two?
My number two is a movie from 2012 by director Robert Zemeckis, who has definitely seen better days. And it's called Flight.
Oh, phew. That's not you mentioned 2012 and I was like, was my one by Robert Zemeckis? Okay, not Flight is mine. So we're good.
It's always good when yours is not flight.
No, it's a great choice. It just was. I'm just glad we didn't have the same one.
But it's about a pilot played by Denzel Washington in a performance that in a better year would have gotten him an Oscar, much like Nicolas Cage got for Leaving Las Vegas, but it did not, even though Denzel Washington is possibly our greatest living actor. And it's about a pilot who is a cocaine addict and an alcoholic he's the definition of a highly functioning addict, which I think is why I relate to the character as much as I do, because when I was addicted to drugs and alcohol, I never missed a day of work. I never missed a birthday. I never missed anything that actually matters. So I have no idea if the people around me noticed that anything was different about me or that I was going through what I was going through. But I was able to continue my life as if nothing had happened. And then at the end of the day, go back into my own spiral. And so he, as a pilot, one morning, the plane that he's co-piloting has a mechanical malfunction. And he has to invert the plane over a field in order to stop it from spinning out. And in doing so, saves everybody except for four crew members and two passengers. And the NTSB tests his blood while he's unconscious and finds out that he's been under the influence of both drugs and alcohol. So he has to go through the whole rigmarole about it, and they try to figure out, if he wasn't on drugs, would he be able to flip the flight? And vice versa, or not vice versa. That doesn't make any sense. And et cetera.
Flight the flip is what vice versa would be, right? Yeah.
There you go. And what I really appreciated most about it is that there's no come to Jesus moment. It's very much up until the last frames of the film, he is still an addict and his life has not changed. And he's even forced to go through a bit of cold turkey in his hotel room waiting for the hearing, and he notices that a door is open to the adjourning room, and he's able to find a mini bar stocked with booze.
Yeah.
And he gets so blasted that he can't wake up, so his friend brings him some cocaine to snort to wake him up. And after the NTSB rules that he is not liable in the flight because he saved everybody, he flat out says, "Yeah, I'm high right now. I am drunk right now, and I'm still here." And you would think that would be a redemption moment, and then you would cut to, him sitting in rehab and everything would be better. But no, he goes to prison. He absolutely goes to prison, and he has to figure out who he is when he's there. And the movie does not take the easy step of showing us that process. It cuts immediately from the hearing to him being in prison. And it forces you to figure out, is he the same man? Are we ever the same person?
Yeah.
And it's a heavy movie. It's fucking heavy.
And man, you'd think, right? You'd think in that situation, well, from what you're saying, it sounds like we don't even know for sure that did it, right? Is he going to be clean now? It's like, well, that's not how it works all the time. And, at that same time, there's a thin line between saying yep, I got away with it, in a braggy kind of prideful way, right? Versus I really need your help. I'm drunk now. Please help me. And I'm not sure what the spirit was and how he offered it. Maybe that's ambiguous.
It was a little unapologetic, but at the same time, you can see that it's washed over his face, and he's realized, I definitely need to do something about it. Whether I have the power to do that or not, that is the main question.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a colleague who had been a heroin user and had alcohol problems. He's passed on since. He was an older counselor at a place where I worked, and he told me he went to Vietnam, which is where he really got into heroin as a soldier during the Vietnam War. He didn't just go there, but he said that he actually asked for help and was sent to prison, because in those days that was the military's response. From what he described to me, he got home from Vietnam, went to the VA health center and said, "I need help. I got hooked on heroin." They said, "You've been doing this when? You brought some back from Vietnam. You did this, you did that. Okay, well, you're under arrest," right? And so he thankfully was able to get his life straightened, cleaned up, became this he was my supervisor for a while of a team that I was on of therapists. He was great alcohol and drug counselor, helped tons of people. But you look at that and say, and this is something he would bring up. He's like, did my time in prison help me, or did it hurt me? Because I didn't get clean right then. You didn't get clean right when I got out, right?
Right.
And so you try to track that, and it's like, where is the help and where's the hurt? And it's like, I don't know. It's hard to say, right? But the things that you would think would set someone on, and this is one of the things that I think is captured in the story you're sharing, is that people think, oh, naturally, logically, this, and it's like, if you're in the throes of addiction, you're not thinking really that logically all the time, right? You're mostly thinking about, hey, this door's open. I bet I can find some mini bottles in that room.
You're not playing chess. You're not thinking your next 5 movements. You are thinking in the moment.
But one of the problems is that some of the time you think you are, right?
Right.
When I worked with court-ordered treatment for people, man, I heard so many stories about how to get away with, how to pass drug tests, right? Interestingly enough, the place I heard them was in court-ordered drug and alcohol treatment places. Everybody had been caught, right? Mm-hmm. But yet at the same time, that fueled this idea that I can get away with this. I can just do this and it's okay. Because I either, whatever it is that we latch on to.
Right.
So, wow, that's a power. I remember the Oscar discussions around that movie when it came out.
I still have no idea. I don't even think he got nominated. And I have no idea why. Like that just does not make sense in my brain.
I remember it was considered a snub at the time. I remember people were talking about that. Yeah.
I remember I saw this movie in the theaters, and when they announced the Academy Award nominations and he was not even on there, I was just like, this is the biggest bout of bullshit I've heard from this Academy in years. Yeah. It still does not make sense to me, and I don't think it ever will.
Huh. There's a podcast by a friend of mine, Joel Winstead, does a podcast called And the Winner Is, and it's him and a guest going through and watching Oscar winners and talking about why did that one win and what do we remember versus the winners versus the losers versus those that weren't nominated that year. Very fascinating to look at what people appreciate. I wonder if perhaps this was a little too realistic for, that kind of consumption or acceptance. I'm not sure. It's not like they never nominate sad movies, but, I don't know. Sometimes it gets a little too real, but that's speaking of real. Here's my my number 2 choice. That's partially my announcer voice, partially my ASMR voice. There's a thin line. There's a real thin line between like NPR host and ASMR. Who knows? Anyway,
they're all the same to me. That all works.
Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast. So in 2012, not by Robert Zemeckis and not Flight, is a movie that stars Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Also,
I think I know what this is. Can I guess?
You can guess, yeah.
Smashed,
exactly. Also starring Aaron Paul from Need for Speed fame. Wait, no, I think he's
That's
better.
That's what he wants you to remember. Hey, all this Emmy nomination stuff. I was in Need for Speed, man.
No, right. He's more known for El Camino. Sorry about that, everybody.
Hey, I love El Camino. Don't say nothing bad about that movie.
I haven't seen it.
It's so good.
Sure
it probably is. Good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a Breaking Bad offshoot, right? So it's got to be. Yeah.
It's so good. Oh, man.
Nick Offerman also plays a supporting role in this movie as well. Have you seen it?
I have not, but I know about it because it is in my Blu-ray collection.
Look at us picking movies that the other person hasn't seen. So this is not only informative for the audience, this is us giving recommendations to each other.
Which is great. That's all I care about. I just want to get recommendations. That's why I'm here.
What are the odds that you and I are going to pick movies that the other people haven't seen at all that are, you know what I mean? It's not like these are nothing movies. Wow. Good for us. I'm proud of us. So in this movie, great movie. I actually was lucky enough to be able to see this at the Sundance Film Festival.
Brag.
I know. That's I'll mention it whenever I can. It's near my home. So, and I had a friend who taught me how to get tickets to it, which turns out wasn't that complicated, but I always thought was. Anyway, the movie Smashed it's very interesting depiction, and it also showcases some of this sadness and loss that is inherent to it. so Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays a teacher who is an alcoholic in active throes of addiction and alcohol abuse, right? Her husband, Aaron Paul, is also, and they really, there's a couple really interesting things about their relationship. You get right from the get-go that they're both caught up in this very self-destructive use of alcohol. And at the same time, their relationship, aside from the fact that they drink together, is not toxic or unhealthy or anything. It's quite healthy, actually. They really care about each other a lot. They seem to have this real tight connection. And the one thing that's unhealthy is that they drink together, right? And they drink to excess and to the point where the opening scene of them, one of the opening scenes somewhere in the first couple of minutes, is them waking up and him teasingly saying to her, like, "Hey, look at this, you peed on me," and they laugh about it a little bit, right? That it's like kind of normal, that stuff like that might be normal in the lives they're having. She is an elementary school teacher. And once again, early on, it also showcases how there's this struggling to keep being functioning in the addiction, as you mentioned that earlier, right? And she actually throws up. She's got a hangover at school. She vomits in the classroom, and the kids are like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" And in desperation for trying to calm them down, she tells them, "Yes, I'm just sick. Are you sick? Why are you sick?" And it's at some point morning sickness. She tells them she's pregnant, right? And then that gets around. All of a sudden, the other teachers are saying, "Oh, congratulations, you're pregnant. You're pregnant," which then, of course, creates the need to say, now, if this were like a silly movie, that would be, she'd have to try to maintain. But at some point when it's not showing or not happening, then of course, right? That's a lie that's going to come back. And it doesn't make it, it's a movie with a few, it's got a few little, Nick Offerman's in there, so there's a few little chuckles, but not a comedy at all, right? You think of that moment of being like, why did I even say that? And now everybody at my workplace thinks I'm pregnant. And how am I going to deal with this in a way that's not going to get me fired, right? Which, being drunk or hungover as a teacher, probably would affect your career success, I would think.
And serves as a metaphor because, it's the constant lie that you have to tell, that I'm okay, nothing's wrong with me. Yeah. And you have to try and get people to go along with it, especially if you're in a desperate situation, that you need the outside validation. You need other people to tell you, "Oh, everything's great." Yeah. So that it'll trick yourself into thinking, "Yeah, it is. I'm fine. I don't need to change my behavior."
Yeah. There has to be that justification. One of the other teachers, is played by Nick Offerman, picks up on, he sees right through what she's going through. At one point, he says to her, "I know what's going on in your life. You should come with me to a meeting." And it turns out he's in alcoholism recovery, and he's a 12-stepper kind of guy. And he invites her, and this starts her being interested for the first time in this idea of being clean from alcohol. And it just goes from there. And one of I think the big strengths of the movie is that it showcases how this married relationship that they have, and it's one of the saddest parts of the movie, but the most important, I think, is it showcases that she begins to have a growing realization that even though they're great together in all these other ways, she can't get sober in this relationship, because her husband is not really interested. He tries to be supportive in ways, and I'll tell you, they have scenes where it just shows them kind of going on a little drive together into some little town, kind of just everything you'd hope you would do with a partner, right, on a Saturday, and just go where he's trying not to drink so she doesn't feel pressured, and then ultimately here's some friends, and here's this, and that trickles in, and trying to make that work. And there's a really like a painful, passionate scene where they end up, she ends up getting very emotional, and even, really almost screaming the line at him that, "I can't get sober with you." Right. And they split right over it. And it showcases how the difficulties of trying to get out of addiction when you're in a relationship where addiction is a big part, even if it's a great relationship. And that's another thing people don't think about, is we tend to think like, "Oh, well, using friends aren't friends." Yeah, they are. They're often family, right? They're people who we may love, who love us. And some of those relationships survive that process of going through. And then some take a huge hit and some of them just don't. You think about friendships and relationships that in order to be healthy and save a life, that sometimes that has to drastically be redefined. Right.
Right.
So, really interesting. And I'll say this for anyone out there. I mean, this is the very end of the movie. So there you go. You haven't seen it, so plug your ears if you don't want to know. The very last scene of the movie, however, is they have this little game that they made up in their front yard. It's like croquet, some version of croquet, and they're kind of fooling around, and it's this fun little thing in their relationship, right? The very last scene is she comes over to get something or drop something or something like that. You know, they're amicable, obviously. And so he says, "Hey, do you want to play the game or whatever it's called?" And she's like, "Okay." And they're kind of messing around in the yard and playing and just being kind of friendly. And then if I remember correctly, it's even the last line is Aaron Paul looks over at her and he's like, "You know what? You're kicking my ass. Do you want to give me another shot?" And there's all this inherent into it that he's essentially saying, "I want you back," right? He's saying you're kicking my ass in this whole thing of, you're healthy. You're not drinking anymore. It's several months later, I think, after or some amount of time. Mm-hmm. And it ends there. They're looking at each other. You can tell there's a connection there still, of course. And you don't know what's going to happen. And this kind of goes to what you're saying, like, what is going to happen? Is she going to say, okay, and try it out? And is he really ready for that? Is it going to pull her back into drinking? There's all these like kind of unspoken things at the end that could very well happen as soon as the credits roll or whatever. And we don't know what they are. Right. And that's the point. Yeah, that's the point. Right.
Yeah. Leave the audience with food for thought.
Yeah. Right. No, and I think once again, that's another thing that people, especially those that are in a supportive role of someone in their life who struggles with any form of addiction, is you just kind of figure like, hey, you stopped. Good for you. But to go back to the point, and you mentioned earlier, right, of that, if I have insomnia and this helps me sleep and I get clean, I still need to figure out how to sleep.
Right.
Right. And I still need to move forward or else, so regarding it as, oh, you stopped. Well, that's great. Problem solved. It's like, well, no, I still have to live my life. Right.
If anything, it's gotten more complicated.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great point. So I would definitely recommend Smashed.
I am absolutely watching it. I am pulling it from my bookshelf as we speak. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Throwing it on the other bookshelf that I can actually see because there's not a bunch of crap in front of it. Okay, shuffle, shuffle, shuffle.
Have you been? Do you ever address this? I've been reading a lot lately about the work that people are doing with tying in object permanence to like ADHD and bipolar individuals. Of how, similar to a baby, when we can't see something, it stops existing. So if I'm going to do something, it's got to be right in front of me.
Yes,
or on a list somewhere in front of me.
That actually perfectly encapsulates my relationship with physical media. Because I have a bookshelf. I have one of those push up against the wall shelves that I had to build from IKEA that was very cumbersome. Now it works. It's perfectly functional now, but it was a pain in the ass to assemble. And then I have the upstairs of my closet, but I have in front of those movies another stack that completely covers up everything that I would like to look at to remember, oh, I don't need to reach out to somebody to get this. I have it. Instead, I have to keep this mental list in my head, and my memory is for shit. It's terrible. So now I struggle to figure out what I've bought, because I've just bought so much crap in my life and I can't see it, and it drives me insane.
I see that on Facebook. I struggle with exactly the same thing. I see on Facebook, you tend to post sometimes when you get like a Criterion set or something, right? In fact, I don't know if you're kidding about having a physical copy of Smashed in your house, or if I
am not kidding. I have it.
See, I'm laughing because I'm identifying with this. Now, for me, often it's digital copies as well, but it's the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, I have that. books.
Right.
Holy cow. In fact, here's the thing. I have to have goals and things. I have to list them somewhere I can see them. And so this is my newest investment recently is, I don't know if you knew they make Post-it notes this big. If you're listening to the audio of this Post-it note will block the entire screen.
Oh my God. It's like a cheese slice. It's amazing.
And so I have one of these big Post-it notes stuck on my desk because I was using the little ones and then my brain got tired of that, gets habituated and you need something new. So yeah, that's how I keep track of goals and things is. Now don't look at how much all of it's written on top of each other though, or else the illusion falls apart that it's organizational. So
making a note, buy really big Post-its. Okay.
There you go. I'll send you the link to the Amazon listing, or you can just, if you look up big Post-it notes, everybody out there can have one. And isn't that what this program is all about? Big Post-it notes.
No. Ultimately, yeah.
Tell everybody where they can find you and the work that you're doing.
Sure. Well, you can find One Track Mind wherever you listen to podcasts. So where you're listening to this now, you can find that. You can also find Reels of Justice literally anywhere. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, everything. Reels of Justice is on Twitter and Instagram at Reels of Justice. And One Track Mind is at One Track Mind Pod on Twitter. That is the numeral 1 Track Mind podcast on Instagram. It drives me insane that I had to put the number 1 because the number 1 is not in the title of my podcast. It's spelled out, but some smartass took it before I ever got a chance, and I hate them for it. And check out, I have exclusive bonus content every other week, up to, I think we're now reaching 100 episodes, bonus episodes. At Patreon at patreon.com/One Track Mind podcast.
Wow, that's a lot. I didn't know you're up that high with them. That's cool.
Yeah, I've been doing them for 2.5 years.
It's about the audio commentaries, right? That are on that you'll find on the theme of the show, I should say.
For the bonus episodes now, because I used to have another podcast, The Coolness Chronicles, that then evolved into One Track Mind. And so the idea is that since my podcast is about audio commentaries and physical media, the Patreon episodes are chronicling directors who have never recorded an audio commentary. So right now I'm doing Steven Spielberg because the guy refuses to do commentaries. Next up, I'm doing Hitchcock because he died before commentaries were invented. And then I hope to do, when that's over, that's going to be a long time because Hitchcock made a shit ton of movies. I don't know if anybody knows this, but he was kind of a prolific director.
He was kind of popular.
Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I mean, most people have only heard of Regarding Henry. Oh, no, The Trouble with Harry. That's what I meant. His comedy that he made, The Trouble with Harry. Regarding Henry's that Harrison Ford movie. See, I messed that up. I just blew that joke.
And then after that, I'm going to do Brian De Palma. And I'm really looking forward to that one because his movies are fascinating. His brain is fascinating. Troubled mind, but boy, do I love hearing him explain why he did things.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great idea. And I think anytime, and this goes for both your podcasts, anytime that you're making a podcast that is about movies as its main theme, you need something to separate it kind of from the pack because there's a bunch out there. And so audio commentaries. And then, of course, Reels of Justice. I've had all of y'all on the show talking about it. I've been on that show too. It's a mock courtroom where you accuse movies are being prosecuted and defended under the charge of being a bad movie. It's a fascinating show. And even though it's a lot of fun and there's a comedic element to it, one of the things I like about it is it really contributes to film discussions that I really don't hear people have anywhere else. Because you pick some movie that a lot of people think sucks and someone has to defend it, or you pick a movie that a lot of people like and someone has to prosecute it. And so you learn to think about stories in a different way, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. What I love about doing it is that it is a legitimate conversation. Mm-hmm. It is, even if we are assigned the movie and we're not one way or another, we need to represent it or prosecute it to the best of our ability. And that requires a lot of thoughtful thinking.
Yeah.
It requires you to actually look at cinema through more than just one lens. Yeah. And when the show is done, our very best episodes are a genuine conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm most proud of. I mean, I didn't come up with the show. That's all Rob. But I am so honored to be part of it because that is ultimately what it boils down to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. Even when Ryan is beating you when you're trying to present a case against the Fablemans or whatever. Any we've all been there. But and in fact, I'm excited to come back. I'm recording with you pretty soon about we're doing Joe versus the volcano. I think we just decided on this.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah,
wait, it'll have already happened by the time this comes out, by the way. So
that's okay.
Go back
in time and just go look at it. It's fun.
It's still out there. It's the internet. Nothing ever goes away. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I always appreciate just being on the show. But thanks for being here and helping me with the long haul live show for this last bit. Didn't have to be live. So we will now, I guess I should segue. We will now return to our regularly scheduled programming of the live feed. Unless I did this at the end, in which case we might not. I haven't decided that yet. And if you're hearing this early, to all you Patreon subscribers, we love you. Ryan and I both equally love you.
Yes, that's true. He said without a gun pressed to his temple.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtemparts.com.